It's Aurora's birthday, so later that night they celebrate it in one of the many restaurants on the ship and then the bar. Jim goes to the washroom and prepares the ring he made for Aurora, while she stays in the bar chatting with Arthur. The android tells Aurora that Jim woke her up intentionally, unaware that he was still to keep that a secret. Suddenly, Jim comes back and she confronts him in absolute disbelief. She runs away furious and panicked. Jim comes back to his cabin to find all her things gone. He runs into her in the canteen the next day, but the moment he speaks, she runs away. Aurora is desperate. One night she goes over to Jim's cabin, punching and kicking him, wanting to kill him. Talking to her over the comm because she keeps avoiding him. Jim tries to apologize and explain his actions to her. He tells her he fell in love with her, but Aurora doesn't care. She can't forgive him for taking her life. One night, as Jim is in his cabin, another malfunction happens. The ship faces a critical error and the main command shuts down. Later, he walks into the elevator and it malfunctions. Aurora walks into the main concourse and sees that Jim has planted a tree there. Then, she goes to the canteen, where the food dispensary is also malfunctioning. Suddenly, both of them hear the voice of the deck chief over the comms, asking, who planted the tree. They both run into the concourse and see Gus Mancuso standing in front of Jim's tree. They introduce themselves and tell the chief about the situation. He doesn't understand how 3 pods could fail. Mancuso takes them to the bridge and he discovers that there is something wrong with the ship, but the information on the systems has to be checked manually. When they leave the bridge, a robot almost falls on their heads. And the two of them tell Mancuso that malfunctions have been happening all over the ship more frequently. He says that shouldn't happen, as he shows them how to collect the data. Mancuso checks on the pods, when Jim joins him there. He's figured out what happened with Aurora's pod. The deck chief finds what Jim did to be terrible. Later, he's at the bridge checking the collected data, when Aurora joins him. They talk about what happened with her pod, but he tells her that he can't do anything about it. Jim walks in with the 16th broken robot. Mancuso feels the hibernation sickness, so he goes to rest, but as he walks out, he coughs out blood. That night, Aurora can't sleep, so she goes for a swim. Suddenly there's gravity loss throughout the ship and she starts drowning as the water from the pool moves with her. The gravity drive resets and she barely makes it out alive. They both run into each other going to find Mancuso. The 3 of them are back at the bridge, slowly discovering what has been going on with the ship. Mancuso figures out that something happened 2 years ago, taking out a major system. They need to find and fix what has caused the failure, because the entire ship is trying to pick up the slack. If they don't fix it, the entire vessel will be stranded. They go to find the problem, but Mancuso faints, so Jim and Aurora take him to the infirmary. He's dying and there are no treatments that can stop it or prolong the time he has left. Some time later, the 3 of them meet in the observatory. And Mancuso gives Jim his ID bracelet, tells them to fix the ship and immediately perishes. Suddenly, the lights change to an alarming red and the ship starts shaking. Jim tells Aurora that he needs her help and they run toward engineering. But there's another failure in the gravity drive. And immediately another one that affects Arthur as well. Jim deactivates him. They finally arrive in engineering and start looking for the problem. They find it in the power plant and as they open the hatch, Aurora gets sucked in. The asteroid has caused a breach in the ship in that area. Jim gets sucked in too, but he holds on to the hatch, as it keeps closing on him. Eventually he gets sucked in too, but they quickly manage to seal the breach. Instantly after fixing that problem, Jim realizes that there is more than one breach in the ship. The 2 of them follow the trajectory of the meteor and find that it has hit the reactor control computer. Jim thinks he can find replacement parts for it. They find the part and change it, but the process of venting the reactor still fails. They do it manually, but it fails again. Jim figures out that he needs to open the vent door from outside of the ship, so they can cool the reactor down. Both of them go to the airlock and as he's getting ready to go out, he gives Aurora Mancuso's bracelet, because he might not come back. She helps him with the suit and as he walks into the airlock she tells him to come back because she can't live on the ship without him. Aurora goes back to the reactor, where the temperature has hit critical heights. A bolt from the reactor propels into her arm, as Jim is getting closer to the vent from the outside and sees the door. The temperature rises in the reactor room, while he is trying to bypass the vent door to open it. He soon realizes that he'll have to manually hold the door open so the reactor can vent and he tells Aurora. She doesn't like the plan, but he goes ahead with it and tells her to vent the reactor. She doesn't want him to die and they argue, but he tells her that they have to save the other people and she vents the reactor. The process is successful, but the fumes from the reactor push Jim away and break his tether. The pressure in his suit is dropping too. He tells Aurora what happened and she moves as fast as she can to get to another suit and bring him in. He apologizes to her again. She puts on a suit and flies out to get him, but her tether is too short. She's pulled back, but suddenly grabs onto his tether and manages to pull him in. Aurora drags Jim into the infirmary, only to find out that he's already dead. She uses Mancuso's bracelet to override the medical protocols and to resuscitate him. The medical pod does the work automatically and revives Jim. Aurora forgives him. Later, Aurora fixes Arthur and they give Mancuso a proper space burial. Jim takes her to the infirmary and tells her that he's found a way to use the medical pod as a hibernation one. He tells her to get inside the pod and ride out the rest of the journey in there. But, as is later revealed, she declines and decides to stay with him, awake on the ship. Jim finally proposes to her and they live out their lives on the ship. 88 years later, the Avalon arrives on Homestead 2. The crew wakes up and finds the ship in a very unexpected state. Aurora leaves them a message, retelling the story of the life her and Jim had on the ship while the rest were sleeping.